You're a lousy fucking softball player, Jack!
Your boys are going down, Danny. I can't stop it anymore.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes, and this is the last DC news update that I'm going to do before DC Fandom. This should be coming out on Saturday night. Should have a whole slate of DC Fandom coverage on Sunday, Monday, maybe even into Tuesday, depending on how much news actually comes out. But today we're going to talk about, we've got details. Mark Waid is returning to DC Comics. It's been a very long time since he's worked at DC. Obviously, he's had some memorable moments in the past. We finally have released details and some information about the story for Tom King and Clay Mann's Batman Catwoman, as well as some information regarding some new Tales from the Dark Multiverse comics. And here with me today to talk about that is Larry King, not the guy from CNN, but he's Larry King Undead. How you doing?
I'm doing good, Wes. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm glad you could make it. I do want to say this. If you've been coming around the channel, but you haven't subscribed yet and you love comics, what are you waiting for? This is the place. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications, give us an enormous thumbs up if you want more Larry King talking about the news here on the channel. Give us an enormous thumbs down if you don't. Either way, we want to hear your feedback in the comment section, and we appreciate you tuning in here today. So let's get to it. Let's get to the big one of that we just found out a couple of days ago. Mark Waid is returning to DC Comics, and he is going to be returning in one of the Tales from the Dark Multiverse stories. He's returning in, DC Dark Knights, Death Metal, the last stories. It's an anthology book, and he's one of the creators on it. So we haven't seen him in a long time. Obviously, he's done some really memorable stuff on Flash. He does have Kingdom Come, so he's got some memorable stuff in the past at DC Comics, but he wasn't allowed back basically as long as Bob Harris was there. But now that he's been shown the door, he was let go during the last round of firings. What do you think? Are you excited for Mark Waid to return to DC Comics?
I think it'd be interesting if this is just like a little, like what they do to Claremont when they bring him out, like kind of wheel him out to do a little anthology, that with short stories. It's one thing, but if this is actually like beginning of Mark Waid, say on a big tier book or even a middle tier book, and then kind of proving himself or whatever, I think this could be interesting. I mean, I know I'm not his character aside, and lawsuits and this, that, whatever, but a lot of his current, like last 10 years or so of writing, I did not like his Daredevil book, which is basically Spider-Man light. But I think he's also a DC guy at heart. He's like Loeb in that regard, where Loeb cut his teeth at DC, and I can only see really him having that clicking, just like with Loeb at DC. I think Waid could produce interesting comics, especially, look what he did with the Flash. I mean, that right there, it's easy to dismiss, and also JLA Year One, which is another hidden gem of a comic. So I think it's possible that this could be a boon for a comic book reader, but there'll be very vocal people that will, he'll completely dismiss what he's done in the past because of his actions, and maybe rightfully so. I mean, it's personal choices. People say, separate the art from the artist, or the writer from the work, or what have you. But I think it could be interesting to see where it goes. I mean, what would be the wild card with him and Carlos Pacheco on Superman or something? I don't know. That would be kind of a bizarre.
Personally, I prefer him not to come back to DC Comics. I think he's a bad dude. You hear so many weird stories over the years, like sending black roses to a man, when he loses his business, reminding him that his wife had passed away, I believe, from cancer. That weird joke insert that he put into a DC anthology. I think it was a holiday special talking about a man that murdered his wife. Just really weird stuff. There are rumors that he might have been somewhat played a part in that. I don't want to get into the details. Just strange stuff. And you talk about Superman, obviously, he did have a really weird pitch. I think it was him, Grant Morrison. I can't remember the third person.
Mark Miller was in there as well.
That's what it was. And so I wonder if, we know Bendis just left Superman. Do you think he's coming back on Superman and to finally write that weird story that they pitched all those years ago?
It could happen, but I leaning towards maybe let's see what he could do on the fringes first. Let's see what sales are like. Let's see if the reception's good. Because at the end of the day, sales aren't the only thing. It's also that kind of, we call it the awards, cred that people seek that, it's Eisner nominated and this nominated, that nominated. And to some people, it's like, oh, the sales are terrible. It doesn't matter. It's beloved within the industry. And it's like, no, it should, sales should matter, at the end of the day, especially at Marvel or DC, or in this case, DC, should focus on that. But unfortunately, for some people that really dislike them, they're going to have another, look at, with the Cherry, the guy that's, the general manager right now, this Waid, that Cherry stuff, Waid, there's going to be people like, it's Marvel 2.0. I've already seen stuff like that. But some people buy it just to hate it. So there you go. There could be that case too.
I'll tell you this: I've read his Fantastic Four antithesis with Adams on the art, and I don't think he's at his top of his game right now. That could have been a three-page comic book if I'm being completely honest. But moving on to the next story, we've got details about Tom King and Clayman's long-awaited Batman Catwoman series. I believe this was supposed to come out earlier in the year. Obviously, the pandemic happened. It kind of got put on hiatus. We hadn't really heard any details. Finally, we know kind of what's going to happen. Me personally, if you've been watching the channel, I'm not a big fan of Tom King's take on Batman and the Batman Catwoman relationship. I'm tired of Batcat and all that noise. But I have to admit, whether I enjoy Tom King's work with the characters of DC, he moves units. There was a bump on Batman after he left, but you look at his sales on Strange Adventure, they're very good, especially for that character. You look on his sales for Heroes in Crisis, pretty darn good. So he does move the needle for DC Comics. So we finally do have some details here. The art's going to be amazing because it's Clayman, but it's going to be 3 different stories. One about the beginning of the Bruce Wayne Selina Kyle relationship, one that's kind of here in the now, and then one like 80 years in the future. I believe Bruce Wayne will be dead and it'll just be Selina Kyle. I'm going to read it just because it's of interest to me. And if it's really bad, I'm going to review it on the channel. Actually, if it was amazing, I'd review that too. But this isn't something I think is going to be amazing. Do you have high hopes for Batman Catwoman?
Was bottom of the barrel count? I mean, it's like, I guess below the barrel would be a more accurate, but Clayman can only carry it so far. As far as the relationship, they won't. They've been doing this for years. This isn't Lois and Clark. This isn't, like even Mary Jane and Spider-Man. Like, this is like the idea of when they were pushing the whole wedding thing and that non-event, and which was just, if I ran a shop, I'd probably be like getting ready to mail, cut out letters from a comic book and mail a hate letter to DC Comics about that. But that was just terrible for them to do that, and then to shift this off like it's basically it's out of continuity. So, and to many, it doesn't matter as far as impact goes. But the romance has spanned time. She's a thief. He's a crime fighter. Okay, yeah, it's like, you're not going to change your ways. I'm not going to change mine. It's like it to me. It almost seems moot. It could be done in like a special, like a 60-page
annual.
Annual, yeah. Like instead of like stretching it out, and it just seems.
Which technically they already did in Batman Annual #1 from Tom King, where it basically told the story of them growing old together, right?
Yeah, I didn't read that though. I'd read some of King's run, and I got so fed up with the way he was writing the Batman and the characters in that world, and in his antics and everything. I was just like, okay. And the whole CIA thing, I'm not a fan of the CIA, so they're probably not a fan of me either. But yeah, it just I kind of washed my hands. Oh, I love Clayman. I do love his work. It's like it's one of those things like he can almost draw you in until you realize it's a Tom King product. Like,
yeah, so. I can tell you this: if you go get Batman Annual #1 from Tom King, it is a beautiful ode to the relationship of Selina Kyle and Bruce Wayne. I imagine this is just going to be 12 issues of that, and it was actually really good. Some of Tom King's early run on Batman was actually pretty solid. It wasn't until he got into the 30s, 40s. Although the War of Jokes and Riddles was really bad. It made Batman look like a putz from day one, which I didn't really appreciate that. But I don't particularly appreciate his take on Batman. Basically, he's a moron. He's incompetent. He can't fight on his own. Catwoman is consistently having to save him, and when she left him, he went and his life falls apart and stuff like that. That doesn't feel true to the character. So I'll be reading it, but I'll love the art. How's that?
There you go. That works. At least you got something pretty to look at.
So I don't know. Did you read the Tales of the Dark from the Dark Multiverse comics?
I did, and I loved every single one of them. I wish there was more. That right there was the biggest disappointment, that there wasn't more. The brutality, it was like EC Comics level brutality in such a fantastic form. The Judas Contract, Death of Superman, it was all great. I mean, the Nightfall one, oh my God, what Azrael does to Batman, does to Bruce, and it was just so horrific. And I'm like, Scott Snyder, why aren't you doing more of this kind of stuff? It was like that kind of that viciousness. I think it was Scott Snyder and James Tynion IV that did that one, did the Nightfall one, and it was so vicious. It reminded me of Scott Snyder's New 52 Batman. I know people loved it. I did not. I disliked the format, disliked all that, pretty much the whole thing. What I did like was his detective run before that, the Black Mirror. I liked
his Black Mirror. That was amazing.
Yeah. Oh my God, serial killer James Gordon Jr. the serial killer stuff, which was just like that's when I think Detective Comics. That's the kind of stuff I want to see, like that kind of more gritty
noir. Detective.
Yeah, Seven, like kind of like a Seven David Fincher kind of deal, and that's what that. It was like taken to another level with the Nightfall Tales of the Dark Multiverse. So any more new Tales from the Dark Multiverse, I am down for in a heartbeat.
Well, we got information on 3 new ones, and we also know there's also going to be a Tales from the Dark Multiverse Hush in Flashpoint out in the future. But the first one we can talk about is Crisis on Infinite Earths. This is going to be written by Steve Orlando and artist Mike Perkins. This is definitely the strongest creative team that they have on any of these. I really like Mike Perkins' art, so I have high hopes for this. Or do you think Crisis on Infinite Earths needs a Dark Multiverse version?
It does. I didn't think it didn't. Infinite Crisis needed one until I read it, and I was like, "Oh, that's amazing!" And these were so good, and I love that. I don't know if you've ever read the What If comics, especially What If Volume 2. But What If Volume 2 had a just overwhelming, in this way, not necessarily a bad way, but pretty much What If Volume 2 pretty much had bad ending. It was the bad ending for everything. Magneto, ruling all mutants on Asteroid M, and there's all the mutants are together, and they were working together, but they're not working together. There's like class warfare, and they fight each other, and then Magneto basically kills Rusty and Skid's baby, has them the people. It's because the baby's going to be an ultra mutant, and Magneto lied. He faked it so to unite all the mutants together in fear of the next step of evolution, to keep them all unified. And like Beast finds out, and he's like, I hate you. I hate what you've done. And it was just terrifying and just dark and disturbing. And that's what these Tales of the Dark Multiverse are. And I'm not a huge Steve Orlando fan, I'll admit, but Mike Perkins on the art, Steve Orlando, this right here, this What If kind of tale, this Elseworlds deal, I'm down. This Tales from Dark Multiverse. I
think it works so much better than like the Year of the Villain, which I felt it bogged down so many titles. But these Tales from the Dark Multiverse, these are actually pretty dope. I'll definitely be checking this one out. There's another one out called Tales from the Dark Multiverse, Dark Knight's Metal, which I find weird because Dark Knight's Metal is kind of in the dark multiverse. But this one is going to be co-written by Scott Snyder with Colin Kelly and Jansen Lanzig, and artist by Carl Mostert and Trevor Scott. This could be interesting. This is, I'm not sure how super excited, but I imagine we're going to be getting that enormous Joker stake again. That would be neat.
See, some of that stuff is okay. Like the metal stuff, I don't mind in doses, but it just it's never fully clicked with me. It's like it's wild and kind of wacky. It's like heavy metal. It literally heavy metal. album cover come to life. Slayer, that kind of stuff like come to life. But I don't. I'll still probably read it. I'll give it a shot because it's like every other one I've enjoyed. So this one right here, I think it really could be a fun read. But I'm a little
more on the fence on this.
A little on the fence. Yeah. I hate to be that way, but it's like, but yeah, the Christ on Infinite Earths, that's going to be fantastic. I hope there's a Dark Knight. There's a Tales from Dark Multiverse Kingdom Come, which I don't know if that's possible to be even darker.
That'd be weird. I think Hush would be pretty cool. That's a good one to do. Also, like, I want some Red Hood on that too. But here's the last one that they announced. It's called Tales from the Dark Multiverse, War of the Gods. Now, this one's interesting. This is Vitae Allen. It's going to be a tale of, like, Wonder Woman essentially being the version of Superman in Injustice where she kind of takes over the world. I am not a big fan of Vitae Allen. She's a pretty okay writer, but I don't think she's very, very great. But although in Wonder Woman 750, her story in there was like a 4 or 5 star comic. It was absolutely brilliant. It was very well crafted, but it was only 10 pages. So she has worked with Wonder Woman in the past, and it's been good. But this is going to be 48 pages. Obviously there's a lot, 5 times more content in here. I'm a little skeptical, but
I'm the same way. Ayala's work, I don't go into comics, read a comic like I want to hate this writer or whatever. But like going into I was like a little, and like it didn't wow me, or I didn't absolutely hate it, but it's just, you're looking at a potential with this 48 page in its own setting and everything, and you really can't do any wrong because like, oh, the character's not right. I'm like, well, Lois going around killing people, that was not right either, but that was great. It was great storytelling. And this kind of this atmosphere for the character, I think could work. I'm gonna give it a shot. Like I said, I'm optimistic towards this. I'm very optimistic, hopeful even, because
I kind of like these things. They feel like they're offshoots of like Red Sun. It is a weird version.
It's that kind of aspect that I think is missing from comics, because Marvel doesn't. All their what if concepts for Marvel have become actual stories. What if Jane Foster got the Mjolnir and she became Thordis? Hey, let's take that idea and just call her Thor. And they did it. All the what ifs, it's like kind of been the case. It's like taking these ideas. What if Conan joins the Avengers? That was actually an issue. What if Conan was stuck in the modern day? That actually, they made that a reality. In what ifs? What if Hulk?
Savage Avengers, yeah.
Yeah. What if Hulk was a barbarian on a barbarian planet? And it's like they did that called Planet Hulk. It's like these ideas end up that like, but this right here being its own, and they even got their own little version of the Watcher, which is kind of fun. So it's this Marvel DC
Fugit.
Yes,
like a Huguenot.
I think it's like, I think it is like the whole time flies play on words, but yeah, I'm down for this. I want there to be more announcements, because we got how many creative teams they got out there, potential combination.
Brian Azzarello's out there. This plays into his strengths.
You've got a point, because that right there, that's probably the best Batman he ever did, because I don't know if you were reading at the time, speaking of Hush, but he did that arc after Hush, and basically between Hush and Red Hood was the Azzarello Rizzo, let's make Killer Croc a pimp arc.
Perfect.
Which is just terrible. But hey, Azzarello Rizzo doing, I don't know, pretty much, I would say, Armageddon 2001, Dark Multiverse, but I don't know. Anything's possible.
But so I guess that'll kind of wrap up the news. Mark Waid is returning to DC Comics. Going to be working on an anthology within the Dark Knight's Death Metal series. Going to be coming out, and I believe it's January. It might be December. I can't remember at this very moment. We've also got details of Batman Catwoman from Tom King and Clay Mann. I imagine that's going to be a big seller. It's going to be set in 3 different time frames. Like I said, if you really want to say this and get the clip notes, go read Batman Annual #1. It's actually a really good comic. And finally, we do have more details on these Tales from the Dark Multiverse comics. I enjoyed the first round. Sounds like Larry did even more than I did, and I'll definitely be checking these out, even if they don't have the most exciting creative teams. Larry, I want to thank you for coming and joining me today. I really appreciate it. Is there anything else you need to say before we wrap this bad boy up?
Read more comics.
Absolutely. And get a pull list. You don't want to miss out on all the best stuff.